I have been saying for quite some time, I do not think that these checks in October are going to come in. I am really not confident at all. Remember, so far, we have delayed them 4 times. We have delayed them 4 times. And the last one was, of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who said that, oh, bringing in these checks in a time of a cost of living crisis would be really unfair to people and businesses. Well, cost of living crisis hasn't gone away. Food prices and the inflation for food has only pushed the price of food up. And now you want to continue with this because bear in mind, there's still no sign that inflation is magically going to go away, just as Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt have hoped, praying to their altar on their free market god, playing, please, please, please let inflation go away. Meanwhile, of course, that hasn't happened because they have done nothing to reduce inflation whatsoever. And of course, these checks potentially coming in October, at least the paper, and then full physical checks coming in January. I am not confident. And bear in mind, the article that we are going to go through here from the BBC and the news about this saying from the Port Authority that we do not have the guidelines on what we are supposed to check. So I am even more increasingly confident that this October deadline is once again going to get moved. So we could be here for a 5th time lucky. If it does get brought in, then that will cause a whole new series of problems, as we've always warned about. But given the fact that the government has not handed over the guidelines, as we are about to find out here, I am not confident these are going to come in October. I am not confident at all. And I think we will be 5 times these checks that are meant to be put in have been delayed. And also in this article, it shows you how important it is for physical checks to take place. Now, yes, we are catching it, but here's the thing. In the case that is mentioned here, how many other cases might not get caught out? And if we are doing all these trade deals, importing vast amounts of more chicken, meat, fish from other sort of countries apart from Europe that do not follow our same high food standards. Yeah, oh, trust me, we're about to find out. So, before we do go diving into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, the Pony Club as well that you can join that helps support the channel as well. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. And on with this. So, this comes from the BBC with the title of Brexit Food Safety Checks on EU Imports Still Unknown. So the food inspection team at one of Britain's biggest container ports say that the lack of clarity around the post-Brexit check on imported food puts them in a difficult position. The paperwork for the European food imports will be inspected from October, with the physical checks then following through in January. The government has said it is working on the inspection guidelines, but the Suffolk Coastal Port Health Authority says that not having them is really quite significant. So we're in June. They're meant to be starting checking the paperwork and physical checks in January, and the government has still not handed over the inspection guidelines. You just can't make this up. You really cannot make this up. So at the moment, the only food coming from outside the European Union is currently inspected. And checks at ports like Felixstowe and Suffolk have already been delayed by at least 18 months because of the government concerns about the potential burden on businesses. And of course, the inspections on EU food will be passed on to importers. What do you think that's going to do? It's going to rise the price of food. So, according to the Department of Food and Rural Affairs, aka DEFRA, nearly half of the food eaten in the UK is imported, and more than two-thirds of that comes from EU countries. The operations manager, Hannah Parting, says that they have been told by DEFRA that the health authority will need to check between, and this is where it gets fun, so you need to check between 1% and 30% of EU imports. But that is hard to prepare, she says, without knowing the exact percentage. That's good. That's just a ridiculous revelation. Oh, you might have to check between like 1% and 30%. Just what? Just what on earth? What on earth? So she says that the unknown is very difficult to work with. She says it is nice to be able to at least have a plan and know what your targets are. Having a low level of checks means that I might not need so many staff. Whereas if the checks becoming increasingly significant, then it's obvious that we are going to turn things around in a timely manner and get trade flowing through smoothly. It puts me in a difficult position. Yeah, it's not just a difficult position. That's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. Just so, how much do I need to check? Maybe between about 1% and 30. Out of the potential amount of food that could come through those two ports, just so it continues though, because this is just I want to just finish off with this final part because this just goes to show you how much and how important having the same standards and sharing these same standards are, because when we were in sort of the EU, we knew that they were the same standards, so we didn't really have to check because we knew that we had all the same rules. Everyone was following them, so we didn't need to. So we could have that free flow of trade. Now, of course, that's gone. But this is how important leaving that has been, and why it has become such a massive, cumbersome amount of paperwork that we have seen businesses just give up importing or even exporting to Europe. And this is going to have a massive knock-on effect for our economy. So, since Brexit, Britain has just got rid of 8 out of the over 2,400 EU food safety laws. And extra workers are recruited to the Port Health Authority when the government's planned checks on EU food imports back in October of 2022. The delays have meant that they have had to be redeployed with the local council, which runs the Port Authority. And Miss Parting does hope that these workers, but warns that they will still need more staff. We will have trailers that will arrive at midnight in Felixstowe from the EU, she says, adding that these checks need to be done in a timely manner so it does not delay trade. A DEFRA spokesperson said that they were trying to conduct a new inspection regime which would, quote, strike the right balance between protecting the UK's biosecurity and supporting businesses getting goods into Great Britain. We have been listening closely to the feedback and we've received from stakeholders, and we will carefully consider what more we can do to support the businesses and for the readiness of these introduction of these new controls, the spokesperson said. Well, easy. First of all, do more alignment deals with the EU. But of course, as we've said, if you do more alignment deals, then you have to start asking the question, why are we not in the single market customs union? And then once that happens, you then go, well, why aren't we full EU members? And then, of course, the entire Brexit argument comes unraveled, just like, pulling at a nice little thread on a woolly jumper. But this is why it is so important, and these checks have to be carried out. You cannot just ignore them. So the team that physically inspects between at least 40 to 70 containers each day from outside the EU, carrying out annual checks on over 100,000 containers. And bear in mind, that's just the non-EU stuff. What happens when we do more trade deals? What happens, you know, when you have to start checking the stuff from the EU as well? That's going to be a lot more containers that they now have to check. So the health authority, which employs over 100 staff to look at labels and even opens product to see if they match, have also got to check documentation against certificates. Rosie Watt, of 30, who used to work at school before becoming an inspection officer 2 years ago, had this to say. We see a lot more chicken from Thailand, some from China, and we see a lot of fish arriving from Morocco and Ecuador, she says. On one occasion, we noticed parasites in the mouth of fish, and they were taking over the tongues of the sea bream, so it wasn't safe to eat. That was pretty disgusting for our colleagues to find out, but also rewarding to know that we'd taken it out of the food chain. And there's the picture there. But yeah, that's how important these checks are. That's why you've got to carry out these checks, because you do not know what happens in transport, and the fact that we are having to transport food from more than halfway around the world when we've got an entire doorstep of food where we could be getting food from. And not only that, but the government isn't even supporting its homegrown producers. It has done nothing, next to nothing, to support them. And yet, apparently, according to many Brexiteers, that's what Brexit was all about, to support British farmers. Yet they've done absolutely nothing. And the Australian trade deal, which came into force just a couple of weeks ago, perfect example of that. Honestly, our economy is going to, I think, take a lot of suffering, and also a lot of people are going to start to realize that these trade deals that we are signing aren't that good. Because as I've said before, people in other countries all around the world know that these trade deals have become big politics. Do you sign these trade deals? Do you not sign these trade deals? Do you talk about what's in these trade deals? What about that was in that trade deal that the past government signed that is damaging sort of your local industries in your country? These are big politics, and we have been very, 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 very much insulated from this politics for years. But this is going to come crashing home with a vengeance. Because remember, the Brexiteers said that all these trade deals would protect our industries, and we could finally leave the protectionist EU, but we were going to somehow protect our industries, even though they were against protectionism, even though they were in the EU, which was also helping protect many of these industries. So, oh dear. Yeah, I do not think these checks are going to come into place. I cannot see. If you've got your port authorities here saying, yeah, we don't have the guidelines, how many containers are we meant to check? Well, DEFRA says between 1% and 30%. That's a pretty large gap. That's a pretty large gap if you wanted to say what you've got to check. And not only that, you've also got to start looking at what happens when you start doing these trade deals with other countries, because that is going to complicate many, many other things, because we've got this trade deal with Australia. What if meat from Australia and these other countries comes in at different standards? This is just more paperwork, adds to the complications, more chance for things to go wrong. So you saw that sea bass or the sea bream that was obviously infected with parasites caught that time. But the more these trade deals start to complicate things and especially the Pacific Trade Agreement, which is just as worrying about what stuff that allows in and what that doesn't allow in. And of course, you've got to forcefully accept another country's lower standards. Well, I do not think it will be long before we start to see food scandals and we start to see, a lot more food recalls. Because that is on the table. I think that's what's going to end up happening, and that is squarely on Brexit. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like and share button on your way out. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.